Podcast episodes are jam-packed with awesome content, but how can you help this content work harder for you? The answer is simple. Release them from their audio-only limitations by transforming your podcast episodes into engaging and SEO-optimized blog posts. Keep listening to find out how. You're listening to the Content 10x podcast, where it's all about content repurposing. I'm Amy Woods, and I'm here to help you maximize your content and find smart ways to get your message in front of more of the right people, whilst also saving time. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Content 10x podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, founder of Content 10x, and in this episode, I'm talking about how to repurpose your podcast episodes into blog posts. I know not everyone listening will have a podcast, but I really recommend you stay tuned to this short episode because I'm sure you have a blog, and this might just inspire you to start thinking about audio content, and you can see the opportunities for repurposing if you do so. Now, you might remember just 6 episodes ago, I talked about repurposing your blog posts into podcast episodes. It was episode 220 called How to Repurpose a Blog Post into a Podcast Episode. And this time I'm talking about turning podcasts into blog posts. So you're going to see how the process works if we flip it on its head. Keep listening and you'll find out the different types of podcast episodes that make great blog posts, my top tips for repurposing your audio content into written content and what to avoid, and also the tech tools that you can use to streamline your processes. Let's jump in. So if you've got a podcast or you are planning to start one, you might stick to one episode style, or maybe you'll mix and match with different styles. So for example, maybe you'll do solo episodes like this episode right now, where you share thought leadership style content or give how-to advice. Or you might do this with a co-host, so 2 of you are presenting in that similar content format. Another really popular format would be where you interview a guest. Again, this could be one presenter or more talking to one guest or multiple guests, which leads on to another format, panel interviews or conversations. So whichever style of podcast you have, it shouldn't affect the ability to make a great blog post because it's all about the content. If you're having valuable conversations or sharing useful insight, then you have the potential to repurpose that into excellent written content that helps your audience. So this is helping those people who just prefer to read. So how can you repurpose your podcast episode into a blog post? Well, first, I want you to think carefully about why you want to repurpose your podcast episode into a blog post. Let's say you've recorded your podcast episode and now you want to transform it into written content on your website. There are many reasons why you might want to do this. First, it's great for helping search engines find your content. Text is still the most powerful factor for helping Google and other search engines locate content that people are searching for. So if you want to boost your SEO for your website, then blog posts are definitely a no-brainer. And secondly, there are people in your audience who just prefer consuming written content. We all consume content in different ways. Many people might not be interested at all in listening to podcast episodes and prefer other formats, so reading may be one of those formats that they prefer. Or they might just not have time to listen to the entire episode, so they'd rather skim read a blog post and decide if it's worth the listen, and then they'll listen on another day or time that suits them best. If you're repurposing for either of these reasons or both, and the good thing is one can be a benefit of the other even if it wasn't your intention, then you'll need to focus on one thing, and that's quality repurposing, because it's all about giving your audience what they're looking for and what they want. Now, in my opinion, audiences don't want a really long transcript being called a blog post. This is the number one thing that I think people get wrong when repurposing their podcast into a blog post. They get a transcript of the conversation, they upload that transcript to the blog section of their website, and they call that a blog post and done. Now, I'm not saying transcripts aren't useful. Actually, far from it. They can be a great addition. So please do go check out my blog post and podcast episode called How Transcriptions Can Play a Key Role in Content Repurposing. So head to content10x.com/49. The title of that episode speaks for itself. They serve many purposes. But as I said, I consider them to be something else. Transcripts are not a blog post. Your audience head to your blog to read articles, not transcripts. And it's not only your audience that you need to think of in terms of what they want to read, but also the search engine bots as well, because they really want to read quality content too. Because when the bots go and troll the internet looking for quality content and they come upon transcripts, well, we don't speak how we write. So transcripts aren't necessarily going to be written very well, and therefore they're not really flagged as quality content. So transcripts don't do much for SEO. But here's a trade secret for you. That transcript can be really helpful to help you then go and write a fully optimized blog post. Hey, just a little break from this podcast episode to ask you a question. Would you like one single place that you can go to that provides you with everything you need to be able to implement the best practices in content repurposing for your video content, your podcast episodes, and your social media content today? To help you get more value from the content that you create, get more time back, and help you reach more people than you ever thought possible. If so, then you are going to love the Content 10x Toolkit. The toolkit is full of video tutorials, templates, checklists, swipe files, step-by-step guides and more that shows you how to repurpose your content in the best ways possible today. No more Googling, no more figuring it out yourself. We provide you with everything that you need to become a content repurposing pro. If this sounds like something that would interest you, then go check out the Content 10x Toolkit at content10x.com/toolkit. Okay, and back to this week's episode. So here's a method our in-house copywriters often use for some of our clients at Content 10x to repurpose podcast episodes into blog posts. So firstly, listen through the fully edited podcast episode and find either a strong narrative thread or the most valuable points within it. Now, it's nearly impossible to cover every point when repurposing a podcast into a blog post. We say so many words per minute, and your blog could end up being thousands and thousands of words long. We don't want that. You don't need to include everything. The conversation might wax and wane, go off on tangents and so on, and that's fine. It's what we expect with conversation, but it's not what we expect with written content. So here's a golden rule. Remember that you don't need to include everything, just the most valuable points. So next, get a transcript of this podcast episode. You can use an AI tool like otter.ai to help you with this. If you value your time and you want a high quality transcript, then invest. So go to rev.com and pay for a quality transcript written up by humans. Transcripts are especially useful if you're repurposing an interview because you may want to include quotes, and having them in text format really helps to streamline the process. But it's also great if you're a more visual person and prefer having text to refer back to rather than searching in an audio file for clarification on particular points and things like that. It's a bit like having your notes in front of you basically when you get that transcript created. So a transcript can help you work out a structure for your narrative or the most notable points if you're writing a step-by-step blog post or a listicle. And remember that you're repurposing here, so you have the freedom to be creative with how you write your blog post. It doesn't have to cover every single point, as I already mentioned before. And it can also elaborate on things missed in the episode. You could provide different analogies, different examples. Your blog could even be a companion piece for the episode rather than an either-or content approach. And I've spoken before about the power of companion content. So if you want to hear more about that, then head back to episode 118, repurposing your core content into companion content. So that's at content10x.com/118, or check out the link in the show notes for this blog post and head on over there. If you're repurposing your podcast episodes into blog posts because you want to rank on search engines, and let's face it, who doesn't want to rank on search engines, then you'll need to do some keyword research and make sure you're putting those key terms into your post in all the right places. So in the blog post title and the headings, and multiple times in the body text, as well as in the URL and the meta description. There are some amazing resources out there for optimizing your blog post with keywords. And I don't profess to be an SEO expert at all, so do go and have a look around and find out more about this. Now, as a minimum, if you are on WordPress, then use the Yoast SEO plugin to try and optimize your post for specific keywords. Also, bear in mind what your blog post actually looks like. So think about your blog from a user perspective. User experience is really important for the success of your site, and that includes how people read blog posts. So make sure you're leaving plenty of white space, keeping sentences short, include graphics and videos, embed your podcast player, add lots of different elements to create more of a holistic and engaging user experience. And this will help your audience stay on your blog for longer. There's just something about visually appealing content that is just more easy to read. And then one final thing, you don't have to be a professionally trained writer to write a really good blog post. If you stick to your brand's tone of voice and keep your audience in mind, structure your post and have a clear purpose, you really can't go too far wrong. And of course, you want to use spell check and maybe use Grammarly for a grammar check as well. There are plenty of resources out there to help you get comfortable with the writing process. I recommend having a listen to my interview with Copy Hackers founder and fantastic client of ours, Joanna Wiebe. It's all about how to write better content. That's episode 188, so content10x.com/188. And that should give you lots of good pointers for how to get started. So that's it, an overview of how to repurpose a podcast episode into a blog post. Quite different from repurposing a blog post into a podcast episode, of course, because we flipped it on its head. Now, this is our bread and butter here at Content 10x. It's what we do. We help businesses week in, week out, and it can be a really time-consuming process. So if you need any help with repurposing your podcast episodes or your video content, then head to content10x.com, fill in our inquiry form, and we can have a chat about how we can help you. I hope you found this episode super useful. Do check out the show notes for more resources. And if you want even more help, then do grab a copy of my book, Content 10x. More content, less time, maximum results. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble online. You won't struggle to find it. Also, just go to content10x.com/book. It is the ultimate guide to repurposing all kinds of content. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode, and I will catch you in the next one.